It began with a simple question that nobody in the chain of command could answer. Why were American soldiers going hungry when Army records showed that the food was arriving exactly where it was supposed to? In the winter of 1944, as General George S. Patton's Third Army pushed across Western Europe, thousands of American soldiers faced freezing temperatures, endless mud, and some of the fiercest fighting of the Second World War. The enemy was dangerous enough. German artillery could strike without warning. Snipers waited in ruined villages. Roads were clogged with military traffic. Yet somewhere behind the front lines, another threat was growing. It did not wear a German uniform. It did not fire a rifle. It operated quietly from warehouses, supply depots, and transportation routes. And when Patton finally learned what was happening, his reaction would send shockwaves through his command. The story started far from the headlines of famous battles. It started in mess lines where soldiers noticed that portions seemed smaller than they should be. It started with supply sergeants who opened crates and found numbers that did not make sense. It started with truck drivers who heard rumors but kept their mouths shut. At first, these incidents looked unrelated. War was chaotic. Deliveries were often delayed. Mistakes happened. Supplies got lost. Most officers assumed there was a reasonable explanation. But the complaints did not stop. The American Army in Europe depended on a vast logistical system. Millions of meals had to move from ports to warehouses, from warehouses to depots, and from depots to frontline units. The system stretched across hundreds of miles. Ships unloaded supplies in liberated ports. Trains carried cargo inland. Convoys of trucks traveled day and night. Every crate, every can, every sack of food was supposed to be tracked through paperwork. On paper, the system looked nearly perfect. Reality was different. As the Third Army advanced rapidly across France during late 1944, the supply network struggled to keep pace. Fuel shortages became a major problem. Transportation resources were stretched thin. Yet some shortages seemed unusually severe. In certain areas, soldiers reported missing rations even when records indicated those rations had already been delivered. The first clues appeared in routine inspections. Quartermasters were responsible for managing supplies. Most performed their duties honestly under difficult conditions. Their job was essential. Without them, armies could not function. But within such a massive organization, opportunities for corruption existed. Wartime Europe was filled with black market activity. Food was valuable, cigarettes were valuable, coffee was valuable. Almost anything that soldiers wanted could be exchanged for money, favors, or luxury goods. Investigators began noticing patterns. A shipment would leave one location with proper documentation. When it arrived elsewhere, quantities sometimes failed to match. The differences were often small enough to avoid immediate attention. A few missing cases here. A few missing crates there. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would instantly trigger an alarm. But when these losses were added together over weeks and months, the numbers became impossible to ignore. The black market thriving across Europe created strong temptation. Civilians struggling through wartime shortages would pay significant amounts for American food and supplies. Some military personnel discovered that stolen goods could generate profits far beyond their military pay. A few dishonest individuals saw opportunity where others saw duty. Meanwhile, frontline soldiers paid the price. In muddy foxholes and ruined towns, infantrymen depended on regular deliveries. Every meal mattered. Food was more than nutrition. It was morale. It was comfort. It was a reminder that someone behind the lines remembered the men doing the fighting. When rations became scarce, frustration spread quickly. Patton understood this better than most commanders. By late 1944, General George S. Patton was already one of America's most famous military leaders. He demanded speed. He demanded discipline. He demanded results. His reputation was built on aggressive operations and relentless standards. Many soldiers feared him. Many admired him. Some did both. One thing was certain. Patton had little patience for incompetence. He also had even less patience for dishonesty. Throughout his career, Patton believed that discipline formed the foundation of military success. Every soldier had a responsibility. Every officer had a responsibility. Every member of the supply system had a responsibility. If one part failed, the entire organization suffered. As reports continued arriving about shortages and irregularities, Patton became increasingly interested. He did not simply accept explanations. He wanted facts. Patton frequently traveled to inspect units personally. Unlike commanders who remained behind desks, he often appeared unexpectedly at locations throughout his command. Soldiers never knew when they might see him. Officers never knew when he might ask difficult questions. This habit made him particularly dangerous to anyone hiding misconduct. According to accounts from the period, Patton developed a reputation for examining details that others overlooked. He could become intensely focused when something appeared wrong. Once his suspicion was raised, he rarely let the matter go. As investigations continued, evidence pointed toward theft. The missing supplies were not disappearing because of German attacks. They were not vanishing because of accounting mistakes alone. Human beings were taking them. The realization was disturbing. American soldiers were risking their lives every day. Some were being wounded. Some were being killed. Yet certain individuals responsible for supporting those soldiers appeared willing to profit from their sacrifices. For Patton, this transformed the issue from a logistical problem into a moral one. Thefts from the Army supply system were not merely crimes against property. In his view, they were betrayals of fighting men. Investigators dug deeper. Records were compared. Inventories were checked. Transportation routes were examined. Witnesses were interviewed. Gradually, a picture emerged of supplies being diverted into black market channels. The black market in wartime Europe was extensive. Stolen military goods could move quickly through networks of traders and middlemen. Food products were especially attractive because demand remained high. American canned goods, chocolate, coffee, sugar, and other items held tremendous value. Every stolen crate represented meals that should have reached soldiers. Patton's anger reportedly grew as details accumulated. To understand why, it is important to understand his leadership philosophy. Patton expected hardship from war. He expected soldiers to endure danger, exhaustion, and discomfort. What he could not tolerate was unnecessary suffering caused by failures within his own organization. When troops lacked food because enemy action interrupted deliveries, that was war. When troops lacked food because someone was stealing it for personal gain, that was something else entirely. As evidence mounted, investigations moved toward identifying responsible personnel. This was not always easy. The Army was enormous. Supply systems involved countless documents and multiple layers of supervision. Individuals involved in theft often relied on forged records, altered paperwork, and cooperation from others. Small thefts could remain hidden for long periods. But corruption has a weakness. The more people involved, the harder it becomes to keep secrets. Eventually, enough information surfaced to expose wrongdoing. Patton's response reflected the leadership style that had made him famous throughout the war. He believed punishment had to be visible. He believed accountability had to be clear. Most importantly, he believed every soldier needed to understand that theft from the army would not be tolerated. Accounts from military records and historical studies show that the U.S. Army prosecuted personnel involved in black market activities throughout the European theater. Investigations by military authorities led to arrests, courts-martial, and disciplinary actions against those found guilty of stealing or diverting military supplies. Within Patton's command, such offenses were treated seriously. The exact details varied depending on individual cases, but the principle remained constant. Those responsible faced consequences. For Patton, the issue extended beyond the value of stolen goods. It was about trust. Armies function because soldiers trust each other. Infantrymen trust artillery units to provide support. Tank crews trust mechanics to keep vehicles operational. Commanders trust subordinates to carry out orders. The supply system depends on trust at every level. The moment people begin exploiting that system for personal profit, the entire structure weakens. Patton recognized this danger immediately. Stories spread quickly through military organizations. News of investigations traveled faster than official announcements. Soldiers heard rumors. Officers heard rumors. Civilians heard rumors. Many wondered how high the corruption reached. Many wondered who would be caught next. That uncertainty created tension throughout the command. Meanwhile, frontline operations continued. The winter of 1944 brought enormous challenges. The German army launched its surprise offensive in the Ardennes on December 16, 1944, beginning what became known as the Battle of the Bulge. American forces suddenly faced one of the most critical moments of the war in Europe. During this crisis, logistics became even more important. Food, fuel, ammunition, and winter equipment were essential for survival and combat effectiveness. Any theft from supply channels became even more damaging. Patton's Third Army played a crucial role in responding to the German offensive. His forces executed a remarkable pivot northward to relieve pressure on American units under attack. Historians continue to study the speed and effectiveness of this movement. Behind the dramatic battlefield operations, supply personnel worked around the clock to sustain combat units. Most performed their duties with dedication and professionalism. That reality made the actions of corrupt individuals even more offensive. Thousands of honest quartermasters, drivers, warehouse workers, clerks, and logistics specialists were doing difficult jobs under wartime conditions. They deserved respect. Those exploiting the system damaged the reputation of everyone else. Patton understood that distinction. He did not view all quartermasters with suspicion. He depended on them. Every successful offensive depended on them. His anger focused on those who violated their responsibilities. As investigations concluded and disciplinary actions followed, a message spread across the command. Nobody was untouchable. Rank would not automatically provide protection. Position would not automatically provide protection. If evidence showed misconduct, consequences would follow. This message mattered because military organizations often depend on perception. Soldiers observe how leaders respond to wrongdoing. They notice whether standards apply equally. They notice whether rules are enforced. Patton wanted them to notice. He wanted honest personnel to know their efforts were valued. He wanted dishonest personnel to understand the risks. Most of all, he wanted fighting soldiers to know someone was defending their interests. Imagine standing in a frozen foxhole during that winter. Imagine surviving artillery fire. Imagine marching for miles through snow and mud. Imagine losing friends in combat. Then imagine learning that someone safely behind the lines had stolen food intended for your unit. You can almost understand why Patton viewed the crime so personally. To him, it represented a violation of the bond between soldiers. Military historians often focus on dramatic battles, famous speeches, and strategic decisions. Yet stories like this reveal another side of warfare. Armies are not sustained by courage alone. They are sustained by logistics, honesty, and responsibility. A stolen crate of food may seem insignificant compared to a tank battle, but for the soldiers waiting to eat, it mattered enormously. The black market remained a challenge throughout occupied Europe. Authorities continued fighting theft, fraud, and illegal trading until the end of the war. Complete elimination proved impossible. The scale of military operations created endless opportunities for abuse. But leaders could influence behavior through enforcement. Patton understood that. His reputation alone carried weight. Soldiers knew he demanded results. Officers knew he expected competence. When he focused on a problem, people paid attention. The investigations into supply thefts reinforced that reputation. They demonstrated that battlefield success did not excuse misconduct elsewhere. They demonstrated that logistics mattered. They demonstrated that discipline mattered. And they demonstrated that Patton believed the men at the front deserved every meal promised to them. Years after the war, stories about Patton continued capturing public attention. Some focused on his victories, some focused on his controversies, some focused on his personality. Yet beneath all those stories was a consistent theme. He believed leadership required responsibility, not selective responsibility, total responsibility. A commander could not demand sacrifice from soldiers while ignoring corruption behind the lines. A commander could not expect trust while tolerating theft. A commander could not build an effective army if standards existed only on paper. That belief shaped his response when evidence of black market food theft emerged. The soldiers fighting under his command faced enough enemies already. Patton had no intention of allowing another one to operate from within. In the end, the missing food was about more than stolen rations. It was about loyalty. It was about integrity. It was about whether the system supporting American soldiers could be trusted. When Patton discovered that some individuals had chosen personal profit over duty, he treated their actions as a direct attack on the Army itself. And that may be the most important lesson of this story. The greatest threats are not always found across the battlefield. Sometimes they are found much closer. Sometimes they wear the same uniform. Sometimes they hide behind paperwork instead of weapons. And when George S. Patton believed those people were stealing food from men risking their lives at the front, he did exactly what many expected from him. He came after them with the same determination he brought to every enemy he faced. Because in Patton's eyes, every stolen meal represented a betrayal of an American soldier, and betrayal was one thing he never intended to ignore.